The sky above Earth was no longer blue. It had been painted a sickly orange, streaked with black smoke that curled upward like the fingers of a dying god. The air smelled of ash and fear, a constant reminder of what had happened just weeks ago. Humanity had thought itself safe behind walls of diplomacy and treaties, believing that peace could be bought with words instead of weapons. They were wrong. Captain Elena Vega stood on the edge of what used to be New York City. Or at least, she thought it was New York. The towering skyscrapers were now jagged skeletons reaching toward the heavens, their windows shattered and walls scorched. Streets once filled with life were now empty wastelands littered with debris and the remains of those who hadn't made it out in time. She clenched her fists tightly, feeling the rough fabric of her gloves dig into her palms. Her jaw tightened as she looked at the destruction around her. This wasn't just war, it was slaughter. Elena remembered the day it all started. The Cruthuri Dominion had arrived unannounced, their massive ships blotting out the sun as they descended upon Earth. At first, humanity had welcomed them cautiously, hoping for trade or alliances. But the Cruthuri didn't want allies. They wanted resources. And when humanity refused to hand over everything without question, the aliens showed their true colors. It began with small raids attacks on remote mining facilities and research stations. Then came the orbital bombardments, raining fire from the skies without warning. Entire cities were wiped off the map in minutes. Governments scrambled to respond, but nothing worked. Every attempt at negotiation ended in failure. Every counterattack was crushed before it even began. The Cruthuri were too advanced, too powerful. By the time humanity realized this wasn't just a conflict, but an extermination campaign, it was already too late. Elena's mind drifted back to her family. Her husband, Marcus, and their daughter, Lily. She could still picture their faces, the way Marcus would smile at her across the dinner table, the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through their home. That laughter was gone now, silenced forever by the same invaders who had turned Earth into a graveyard. Elena had tried to protect them, hiding them in one of the underground bunkers designed to withstand anything. But the Cruthuri found them anyway. She could still hear Lily screaming as the bombs fell. She shook her head violently, forcing the memory away. There was no time for grief, not yet. Not while there were still people depending on her. Elena was a soldier, trained to lead and fight. And right now, humanity needed leaders more than ever. Survivors had gathered in scattered pockets across the globe, hiding in bunkers, caves, and abandoned buildings. Some had fled to orbital colonies, seeking refuge among the stars. Others formed resistance cells, striking back against the Cruthuri whenever they could. But none of it was enough. Not yet. Elena turned away from the ruins of the city and walked toward the makeshift camps set up nearby. Tents made from salvaged materials dotted the landscape, surrounded by fences cobbled together from scrap metal and barbed wire. People moved about cautiously, their eyes darting nervously toward the sky. Children clung to their parents, too young to understand why they couldn't go outside anymore. The adults, however, knew all too well. They carried the weight of loss in their shoulders. The exhaustion etched deep into their faces. At the center of the camp stood a large tent marked with a red cross. Inside, doctors and medics worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. Supplies were running low, and many injuries went untreated simply because there wasn't enough medicine to go around. Elena stepped inside, nodding grimly at the sight of so much suffering. A young boy lay on a cot, his leg wrapped in bloody bandages. His mother sat beside him, stroking his hair gently as tears streamed down her face. Elena hesitated for a moment, then knelt beside them. "He'll pull through," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if it was true. "We're going to make sure of it." The woman looked up at her, her eyes filled with despair. Why did they do this to us? What did we ever do to them? Elena didn't have an answer. All she knew was that the Crithery viewed humanity as weak, inferior beings unworthy of mercy. To them, Earth was nothing more than a resource to be harvested, its people insects to be crushed underfoot. But Elena refused to believe that humanity was powerless. If they couldn't fight back directly, then they would find another way. They had to doubt as night fell. Elena climbed to the top of a nearby hill, where she could see the distant glow of alien ships hovering in orbit. Their lights pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast watching over its prey. She stared at them for a long time, her thoughts racing. Somewhere out there, the Crithery were planning their next move. Maybe they thought humanity was finished, broken beyond repair. Maybe they believed they'd won, but they were wrong. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was worn and faded, the edges frayed from being handled too many times. In it, she stood between Marcus and Lily, all three of them smiling brightly. She traced her fingers over their faces, feeling a surge of determination rise within her. For them, for everyone who had died, she wouldn't give up. She couldn't. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "Not while we still breathe." Behind her, the camp settled into uneasy silence, the only sounds coming from the crackling fires and the occasional cry of a child. Above, the alien ships continued their silent vigil, oblivious to the spark of defiance growing in the hearts of the survivors below. Elena knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be long and painful, filled with sacrifices and losses. But one thing was certain: humanity wasn't done fighting. Not yet. And when the time came, the Crithery would regret ever setting foot on Earth. The underground bunker was cold and damp, its walls lined with rusting metal panels that groaned under the weight of the earth above. Dim lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the crowded room. People moved about with purpose, their faces pale but determined. They were survivors, clinging to hope in a world that seemed intent on crushing them. In the center of it all stood Captain Elena Vega, her presence commanding even in the cramped space. Elena leaned over a table covered with maps and schematics, her sharp eyes scanning the details. Scattered around her were other leaders of the resistance scientists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians who had banded together in defiance of the Crithery Dominion. Each person carried the scars of loss, but they also carried something else, a burning desire to fight back. "We can't keep hiding," Elena said, breaking the tense silence. Her voice was firm, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Every day we wait, the Crithery grow stronger. We need to hit them where it hurts." A man named Dr. Marcus Hawley, a wiry engineer with glasses perched precariously on his nose, nodded eagerly. He pushed a pile of papers toward Elena. "We've been studying their technology," he explained. "They leave behind wreckage after every attack. If we can reverse engineer it, we might be able to build weapons capable of matching theirs." Elena raised an eyebrow. "How long will that take?" "Months, maybe longer," Marcus admitted. "But we've already made progress. Look at this." He held up a small device, a jagged piece of alien machinery fused with human-made circuits. "This is a prototype energy weapon. It's not perfect, but it works." Elena took the device in her hands, turning it over carefully. It hummed faintly, emitting a soft blue glow. She could feel the power radiating from it, raw and untamed. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. "Good work," she said simply. "Keep going. We'll need more of these if we're going to stand a chance." As the meeting continued, plans began to take shape. The resistance decided to focus on 3 key objectives: scavenging alien tech, launching targeted strikes against Crithery supply lines, and gathering intelligence on their enemies. But Elena knew that none of it would matter unless they struck a decisive blow, one that would send a message to both the Crithery and the rest of humanity. That night, Elena found herself staring at a holographic map projected onto the wall of her quarters. The image showed the solar system, dotted with red markers indicating Crithary strongholds. One location stood out, a massive outpost orbiting Mars. It was heavily guarded, bristling with weapons and shielded by layers of defenses. But according to intercepted communications, it housed critical data about the Crithary's operations, and possibly a weakness they could exploit. Elena tapped the marker thoughtfully. Taking down the outpost wouldn't be easy. It would require precision, stealth, and a lot of luck. But if they succeeded, they could turn the tide of the war. She turned to leave, her mind racing with possibilities. The raid on the Martian outpost began under the cover of darkness, or what passed for darkness in space. A small fleet of human ships approached cautiously, their engines running silent to avoid detection. Inside the lead vessel, Elena sat strapped into her seat, her fingers gripping the armrest tightly. Beside her, Lieutenant Ryan Carter, a young pilot with a cocky grin, kept his eyes glued to the controls. "You ready for this, Captain?" Ryan asked, glancing at her briefly. Elena gave him a thin smile. "Let's just get it done." The ship slipped past the outer perimeter of the outpost undetected, thanks to a clever hacking trick devised by one of the Resistance's tech experts. As they drew closer, Elena's team prepared to deploy. Clad in sleek black armor and armed with hybrid weapons cobbled together from alien tech, they looked more like ghosts than soldiers. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the outpost, retrieve the data, and escape before the Crithary realized what had happened. When the boarding ramp lowered, Elena led the charge, her boots thudding softly against the metal floor of the outpost. The corridors were eerily quiet, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Every step felt heavy, weighed down by the knowledge that failure meant death, for her and for everyone counting on her. Suddenly, a group of Crithary soldiers rounded the corner, their insect-like bodies clicking ominously as they moved. Elena reacted instantly, raising her weapon and firing a burst of energy. The shot struck true, sending the nearest alien sprawling to the ground. Her team followed suit, unleashing a barrage of fire that overwhelmed the enemy. Within seconds, the corridor was littered with lifeless bodies. "Move!" Elena barked, gesturing for her team to press forward. Time was running out. They reached the control room without further incident, thanks to careful planning and sheer determination. Inside, rows of consoles blinked with alien symbols, incomprehensible to human eyes. Fortunately, the Resistance had sent along a specialist, a brilliant hacker named Priya Patel, who quickly got to work deciphering the systems. While Priya worked, Elena kept watch, her weapon trained on the door. She could hear distant sounds of movement, the telltale signs of reinforcements closing in. Sweat dripped down her brow, but she didn't dare wipe it away. "Not now, I've got it," Priya exclaimed suddenly, pulling a data chip from the console. "This has everything: ship locations, troop movements, even weaknesses in their defenses." "Good," Elena said, snatching the chip and shoving it into a secure pouch. "Now let's get out of here." The return journey was chaos. Alarms blared throughout the outpost, and Crithary forces swarmed the corridors. Elena's team fought fiercely, trading blows and bullets with their enemies. Despite being outnumbered, they held their ground, driven by desperation and adrenaline. When they finally reached the extraction point, half the team was gone, lost to the relentless assault. Back aboard the ship, Elena collapsed into her seat, her body trembling with exhaustion. The mission had been costly, but they'd succeeded. As the ship pulled away from the outpost, she allowed herself a brief moment of relief. They had done it. They had struck back. Days later, the Resistance gathered to analyze the stolen data. What they discovered was both shocking and exhilarating. The Crithary relied almost entirely on a single energy source called plasma cores to power their ships, weapons, and shields. Without these cores, their empire would crumble. "This is it," Elena said, addressing the assembled group. "If we can destroy or seize enough of these cores, we can cripple the Critheri. This is our chance to win." Cheers erupted throughout the room, voices rising in defiance and hope. For the first time since the slaughter, humanity saw a path forward, not just to survive, but to triumph. Elena stepped forward, her expression fierce. "No more running. No more begging. It's time to take back what's ours." Her words echoed through the bunker, igniting a spark of rebellion that would soon grow into a roaring flame. The Critheri had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The resistance was no longer hiding in the shadows. The stolen data from the Martian outpost had given them a roadmap to victory, and they wasted no time putting it to use. Factories that had once churned out consumer goods were now repurposed to build weapons and ships. Scientists worked around the clock, refining the hybrid technology they had scavenged from Critheri wreckage. Engineers pieced together new fighters and bombers, their designs sleek and deadly. For the first time since the slaughter, humanity felt like it had a fighting chance. Captain Elena Vega stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, the flagship of the human fleet. It wasn't much compared to the massive Critheri dreadnoughts, but it was sturdy, fast, and armed with experimental plasma cannons reverse-engineered from alien tech. Around her, the crew bustled with activity, their faces tense but focused. They were preparing for the first major offensive against the Crithori, coordinated strike on a mining operation near Jupiter. The facility was one of the largest sources of plasma cores in the solar system, and destroying it would deal a crippling blow to the Dominion. Elena stared at the holographic display in front of her, which showed the positions of the human ships and their targets. "Remember," she said, addressing the crew, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been crushed by the Critheri. This is our moment to show them what we're made of." The fleet launched at dawn, or what passed for dawn, in the endless void of space. Dozens of ships, ranging from small fighters to heavily armed cruisers, moved in formation toward the mining operation. The plan was simple: hit hard, destroy the facility, and retreat before the Critheri could mount a counterattack. But as anyone who had faced the Dominion knew, nothing was ever truly simple. As the human fleet approached the mining operation, the scale of the target became clear. The facility was enormous, a sprawling complex of drills, refineries, and storage units anchored to an asteroid. Massive Critheri warships patrolled the area, their glowing hulls casting eerie shadows across the rock. Elena clenched her jaw. The enemy was ready for them. "Stay sharp," she ordered over the comms. "We only get one shot at this." The battle began with a barrage of missiles fired from the human ships. Explosions erupted across the asteroid's surface, sending chunks of debris spinning into space. The Critheri ships responded immediately, unleashing torrents of energy beams that cut through the darkness like lightning. One of the human cruisers took a direct hit, its engines failing as it drifted helplessly. Elena's heart sank, but there was no time to mourn. The fight was far from over. The Iron Resolve led the charge, weaving through enemy fire with surprising agility. Its plasma cannons roared to life, blasting holes through the shields of a Critheri destroyer. The alien ship shuddered under the assault, its hull cracking open like an egg. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Elena silenced them with a raised hand. "Focus," she snapped. "We're not done yet." The real challenge came when the human fighters reached the mining facility itself. Swarms of Critheri drones poured out of the structure, buzzing around the attackers like angry hornets. The pilots fought back fiercely, their ships darting and spinning in dizzying maneuvers. Explosions lit up the void as drones and fighters collided, turning the battlefield into a chaotic light show. Amid the chaos, Elena spotted her opportunity. A large transport ship was docked at the facility, likely loaded with plasma cores, ready to be shipped back to the Crithri homeworld. If they could destroy it, the impact would be devastating. She signaled for a squadron of bombers to follow her lead. "Stay close," she instructed, "and don't let them shoot you down." The bombers broke away from the main fleet, racing toward the transport ship. Crithri turrets swiveled to track them, spitting streams of energy that narrowly missed their mark. Elena gritted her teeth, guiding her ship through the storm of fire. When they were within range, the bombers unleashed their payloads, sending waves of explosives crashing into the transport. The resulting explosion was massive, engulfing the facility in a blinding flash of light. "Yes!" Someone shouted on the bridge, but Elena didn't join in the celebration. Her eyes were fixed on the damage report, scrolling across her screen. The facility was crippled, but not destroyed. Worse, the Crithri reinforcements were closing in fast. "We need to go," she ordered, her voice calm but urgent. Now, the human fleet disengaged, retreating into the safety of hyperspace before the Crithri could regroup. As the ships returned to Earth, Elena allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a start. The Crithri had underestimated humanity again, and they would pay for it. Back on Earth, the mood was electric. News of the successful raid spread quickly, igniting a wave of hope among the survivors. For weeks, people had lived in fear, believing the Crithri to be unbeatable. Now, they saw proof that the tide could turn. Resistance cells around the globe redoubled their efforts, launching smaller attacks on Crithri outposts and supply lines. Each strike weakened the Dominion a little more, chipping away at their dominance. But the biggest breakthrough came when humanity discovered something unexpected. They weren't alone in their fight. During another raid on a Crithri communications hub, Elena's team intercepted a transmission between two alien factions. To their surprise, the message revealed deep divisions within the Dominion. Some Crithri commanders were questioning the wisdom of invading Earth, arguing that the humans were proving to be a far greater threat than anticipated. Others called for peace, claiming that continuing the war would only lead to mutual destruction. Elena listened to the recording in stunned silence. The Crithri weren't invincible. They were fractured, vulnerable. If humanity played its cards right, they might be able to turn these internal conflicts to their advantage. "This changes everything," she told her advisors during a strategy meeting. "If we can convince some of these factions to side with us, or at least stay neutral, we'll have a real shot at winning." It was a risky plan, but Elena knew they couldn't afford to hold back. The resistance began broadcasting messages across the stars, appealing to other species oppressed by the Crithri. At first, there was no response. But slowly, allies began to emerge. A race of insectoid beings known as the Vortex sent weapons and supplies. A group of rogue Crithri defectors offered intelligence on Dominion tactics. Together, they formed a coalition united by a single goal: to end the tyranny of the Dominion once and for all. The turning point came at Titan, Saturn's largest moon. The Crithri had established a key plasma core facility there, using it as a staging ground for further attacks on Earth. If humanity could destroy it, they would deal a fatal blow to the Dominion's operations in the outer solar system. Elena led the assault personally, commanding a joint force of human and alien ships. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Crithri warships unleashed devastating barrages of energy, while human bombers dodged and weaved through the chaos, targeting the facility's core reactors. Elena's own ship took multiple hits, its shields flickering dangerously low. But she refused to retreat, knowing that failure was not an option. Finally, after hours of relentless fighting, the facility collapsed in a spectacular explosion. The shockwave rippled through the surrounding moons, sending tremors that could be felt even on distant Earth. The victory was costly. Many ships were lost. and countless lives were sacrificed, but it was worth it. The Chthuri forces in the outer solar system were left in disarray, their supply lines severed and their morale shattered. When the dust settled, Elena addressed the coalition over a secure channel. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "We've shown them that we're not afraid to fight. Now it's time to take the fight to their doorstep." Her words were met with cheers, both from the humans and their newfound allies. For the first time in years, the galaxy saw humanity not as victims, but as warriors. The Chthuri had awoken a sleeping giant, and now that giant was ready to roar. The galaxy was burning. Flames of rebellion spread across star systems, ignited by humanity's defiance and fueled by the growing coalition of oppressed species. The Chthari Dominion, once a seemingly unstoppable force, now found itself fighting on multiple fronts. Their vast empire, built on fear and exploitation, was crumbling under the weight of resistance. But they were not yet defeated, and neither was humanity ready to claim victory. Captain Elena Vega stood in the command center of the Iron Resolve, staring at the holographic map that dominated the room. The image showed the Chthuri homeworld, a massive planet surrounded by layers of orbital defenses, fleets of warships, and an impenetrable energy shield. It was the heart of the Dominion, the source of its power. To destroy it would mean the end of the Chthuri's reign. But getting there would require more than courage. It would demand sacrifice. Elena turned to face her advisors, a mix of human officers and alien representatives from the coalition. "We've pushed them back," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "But they're preparing something big, something final." Dr. Marcus Hawley, the wiry engineer who had helped develop their hybrid weapons, stepped forward. His glasses reflected the soft glow of the hologram as he spoke. "Our spies have confirmed it. The Chthuri are building a superweapon, a planet-destroying device, capable of wiping out Earth entirely. If they finish it, we're done." A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone knew what was at stake. Earth, already battered and scarred, couldn't withstand another attack. If the weapon fired, humanity's last refuge would be erased from existence. Elena clenched her fist tightly. "Then we don't let them finish it. We hit them before they can use it." The plan was insane. Suicide, even. The Chthuri homeworld was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Breaking through its defenses would take every ship, every soldier, and every ounce of ingenuity humanity and its allies could muster. But Elena didn't see any other choice. They had come too far to give up now. The fleet gathered near Saturn, a ragtag armada of human ships, Vorthic cruisers, and vessels from other species who had joined the fight. Together, they numbered in the hundreds, still outnumbered by the Chthuri, but united by a shared purpose. As the ships prepared for the journey to the homeworld, Elena addressed the coalition over a secure channel. "This is it," she said, her voice carrying both determination and sorrow. "Everything we fought for comes down to this moment. The Chthuri think we're weak. They think we'll break under pressure. But we've shown them time and again that we won't back down. Today, we prove it one last time." Her words resonated across the fleet, sparking cheers and shouts of defiance. Soldiers checked their weapons, engineers made final adjustments to engines, and pilots ran simulations of the upcoming battle. Everyone knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they had no other option. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Elena retreated to her quarters for a rare moment of solitude. She pulled out the worn photograph of her family, tracing the edges with trembling fingers. Marcus and Lily smiled up at her, frozen in time, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered. "For everyone." The assault on the Chthuri homeworld began with a brutal exchange of fire. The coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace, just outside the planet's orbit, immediately drawing the attention of the Dominion's defenders. Critheri warships surged forward, their weapons blazing. Plasma beams and missiles filled the void, turning space into a deadly storm of light and destruction. Elena led the charge aboard the Iron Resolve, weaving through enemy fire with practiced precision. Her ship took hit after hit, its shields flickering dangerously low. Alarms blared across the bridge, but she ignored them, focusing instead on the mission ahead. "Keep pushing," she shouted to her crew. "We're not stopping until we reach the surface." Breaking through the orbital defenses was only the first challenge. Once inside the atmosphere, the Coalition faced swarms of Critheri fighters and ground-based turrets. Explosions rocked the sky as ships crashed into buildings and mountains, leaving craters in their wake. Elena's strike team, a small group of elite soldiers and engineers, detached from the main fleet and descended toward the Super Weapon facility. The facility was a fortress, bristling with guards and automated defenses. Elena's team landed on a nearby ridge, taking cover behind rocks as they assessed the situation. "There's too many of them," muttered Lieutenant Ryan Carter, his usual cockiness replaced by grim resolve. "We'll never get through alive." "We don't have a choice," Elena snapped, her tone sharp but calm. "If we fail, Earth dies. Now move." The team advanced cautiously, using stealth and precision to eliminate sentries and disable turrets. Each step brought them closer to the facility's core, where the super weapon was being assembled. Inside, they found a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, guarded by Critheri soldiers and drones. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat. Finally, they reached the control room. A massive console dominated the space, surrounded by screens displaying schematics of the super weapon. Elena gestured for Priya Patel, the hacker who had cracked the Martian outpost systems, to get to work. "Do what you did last time," she ordered. "Shut it down." Priya nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Lines of alien code scrolled across the screens as she worked, sweat dripping from her brow. Behind her, the rest of the team held off waves of Critheri reinforcements, trading fire and buying precious seconds. "I'm in," Priya exclaimed suddenly, disabling the weapon now. Before anyone could celebrate, the doors burst open and a towering figure strode into the room. It was the Critheri Emperor himself, clad in golden armor that gleamed menacingly in the dim light. His insectoid body clicked ominously as he moved, his multifaceted eyes locking onto Elena. "You dare challenge me?" The Emperor hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are nothing but insects, scurrying beneath my feet." Elena raised her weapon, her expression cold and unyielding. "You're wrong," she said. "We're not insects. We're survivors. And today, we win." The duel that followed was fierce and chaotic. The Emperor wielded a plasma blade, its edge crackling with energy, while Elena relied on quick reflexes and sheer determination. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Despite the Emperor's size and strength, Elena managed to dodge and counterattack, landing blows that weakened his defenses. Finally, with a desperate lunge, she drove her blade into the Emperor's chest. He staggered backward, his glowing eyes dimming as he collapsed to the ground. For a moment, there was silence. Then Priya shouted, "It's done!" The weapon's offline. Cheers erupted among the team, but Elena didn't join in. She stared at the fallen Emperor, her chest heaving with exertion. Victory tasted bitter, knowing how much it had cost. But it was victory nonetheless. As the coalition forces withdrew from the homeworld, the Critheri surrendered. Without their leader, and with their super weapon destroyed, the Dominion fell into chaos. Ships abandoned their posts, and entire fleets defected to the coalition. For the first time in decades, peace seemed possible, back on Earth, Elena stood on a hill overlooking the ruins of New York City. The sky was still orange, but for the first time, it felt like hope might return. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush against her face. The war was over. Humanity had survived, but Elena knew the scars would remain for her, for Earth, and for the galaxy. Still, she allowed herself a small smile. They had done the impossible. They had fought back, and they had won. No more running, she whispered to herself. No more begging. From now on, we stand strong. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity would never be underestimated again. The war was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. Earth was a shadow of its former self, its cities reduced to rubble, and its people forever changed by the horrors they had endured. Yet amidst the ruins, there was hope, a fragile, flickering light that refused to be extinguished. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged victorious. And now, it was time to rebuild. Captain Elena Vega stood on the steps of the United Earth Assembly Building, a grand structure hastily constructed from salvaged materials in the heart of what used to be London. Before her stretched a sea of faces, young and old, human and alien, all gathered to hear her speak. The air buzzed with anticipation, a sharp contrast to the despair that had gripped the world just months ago. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who had fought, suffered, and died to make this moment possible. Today, she began, her voice steady and clear. We stand at the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Earth, but for all those who have dared to fight for freedom. Her words echoed across the square, drawing murmurs of agreement from the crowd. We've paid a heavy price for this victory. Too many lives have been lost. Too many dreams shattered. But we are still here. We are still standing. And we will not forget what it cost us to get here. Elena paused, letting her gaze sweep over the audience. She saw determination in their eyes, but also pain. They carried the same burden she did, the memories of loved ones gone, of worlds destroyed, of battles fought where survival felt like a miracle. But they also carried something else, resilience. It was written in the way they held themselves, in the quiet strength that radiated from even the youngest child. Humanity had been pushed to its limits, but it had not broken. We made a mistake once. Elena continued, her tone hardening slightly. We thought kindness alone could protect us. We believed that extending our hands in peace would be enough. But the Krithari taught us a painful lesson. Kindness without strength is weakness. And weakness invites destruction. She clenched her fists at her sides, remembering the day the slaughter began, the day humanity learned the hard truth about the universe. From this day forward, we choose strength. Not because we seek conflict, but because we refuse to let anyone else decide our fate. Her words ignited a swell of applause, cheers rising from the crowd like waves crashing against a shore. Elena allowed herself a small smile, though her heart remained heavy. This was not a celebration of conquest or domination. It was a declaration of purpose, a promise to the future that humanity would never again allow itself to be preyed on. In the weeks that followed, Earth began to heal. Reconstruction efforts spread across the globe, driven by both human ingenuity and the help of their newfound allies. Cities rose from the ashes, their designs blending modern technology with sustainable practices. Factories reopened, producing goods not just for survival, but for progress. Schools welcomed students back, teaching lessons not only of history and science, but of unity and resilience. Slowly, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but humanity's ambitions extended far beyond rebuilding. With the fall of the Krithari dominion, power vacuums had opened across the galaxy. Entire star systems, once oppressed under alien rule, now looked to Earth as a beacon of hope. Leaders from dozens of species traveled to Earth, seeking alliances and partnerships. Some came out of gratitude, others out of necessity. All shared one thing in common: a desire to ensure that no empire like the Crithries would ever rise again. Elena played a key role in shaping this new era. Alongside representatives from the Coalition, she helped draft the charter for the Interstellar Alliance, a coalition of planets, species, and civilizations united by a commitment to mutual protection and prosperity. The alliance was more than a political entity. It was a promise. A promise that no species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, would face oppression alone. At the inaugural assembly of the Alliance, Elena delivered another speech, this time addressing delegates from across the galaxy. For too long, she said, the strong have preyed upon the weak. For too long, fear has ruled where courage should have thrived. Today, we say enough. Enough suffering. Enough silence. Together, we will build a future where every being can live free from tyranny. Her words resonated deeply, earning her not just respect but admiration. To many, Elena was more than a leader. She was a symbol of defiance, proof that even the most unlikely underdogs could triumph against overwhelming odds. Yet despite the praise, Elena remained humble. She knew that leadership was not about glory. It was about responsibility, and she intended to honor that responsibility until her last breath. As the years passed, Earth transformed into something greater than it had ever been before. Its people embraced their place among the stars, exploring distant worlds and forging bonds with alien cultures. Technology advanced rapidly, fueled by collaboration between humans and their allies. Diseases were cured, energy crises solved, and environmental damage reversed. Humanity flourished, not because it had forgotten its past, but because it had learned from it. Elena eventually stepped down from her position as a military leader, passing the torch to younger generations eager to shape the future. She retired to a quiet home near the coast, where she spent her days reflecting on everything she had witnessed. Sometimes she visited memorials dedicated to those who had fallen during the war. Other times, she simply sat by the ocean, watching the waves roll in and out, finding solace in their endless rhythm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elena pulled out the photograph of Marcus and Lily. Their smiles seemed brighter now, less tinged with sorrow. She traced their faces gently, whispering, "I did it. For you. For everyone." Though the pain of loss never fully faded, it became easier to bear. Elena knew that Marcus and Lily would have been proud, not just of her, but of humanity as a whole. They had risen from the ashes of despair, proving that even in the darkest moments, light could still shine through. The galaxy watched Earth with cautious optimism. Many wondered if humanity's newfound strength would lead to arrogance, to the same kind of cruelty that had defined the Crithary. But Elena's legacy ensured otherwise. Under her guidance, humanity had learned that true strength was not about domination or revenge. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. It was about standing firm in the face of adversity while extending a hand to those in need. As ships carrying human explorers ventured deeper into the cosmos, their banners bore a simple message: humanity stands strong. It was a reminder to both friends and foes that Earth was no longer a planet to be underestimated. It was a force to be respected. And somewhere, amid the stars, Elena Vega smiled, knowing that the future was in good hands.